This happened about 3 months ago, and I'm still not entirely sure what I witnessed that night. My name is Ashley, and I'm a 27-year-old nurse living in Charlotte, North Carolina. I work 12-hour shifts at the hospital, and by the time I get off work, I'm usually exhausted and starving. There's this Chick-fil-A about halfway between the hospital and my apartment that I stop at probably 3 times a week. I know that's probably too much Chick-fil-A, but after dealing with everything I deal with at work, sometimes you just need those waffle fries and a lemonade, you know what I mean? This particular night was a Tuesday in late August. I'd just finished a brutal shift. We'd been slammed all day, and I hadn't eaten anything since my lunch break at 1 in the afternoon. It was now almost 8:30 at night. I was driving home on autopilot, and I pulled into the Chick-fil-A parking lot without even really thinking about it. The dining room was already closed, but the drive-thru was open until 9. There were maybe 4 or 5 other cars in the parking lot. Most of them were probably employees finishing up their shifts. The drive-thru line had 3 cars in it, which wasn't bad at all. I pulled in behind the last car and put my car in park, just waiting my turn. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through social media while I waited. Just mindless scrolling to decompress from the day. That's when I noticed the van. It was parked in the far corner of the lot, away from the lights. One of those older model white cargo vans with no windows in the back. The kind you see in every true crime documentary. I only noticed it because the interior light was on, and I could see someone sitting in the driver's seat. They appeared to be looking down at something. Probably their phone, I assumed. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe they were waiting for someone. Maybe they were a delivery driver taking a break. Whatever. I went back to scrolling on my phone. The line moved forward and I pulled up, now second in line. I glanced back at the van, and the person was still sitting there, still looking down. But now I noticed something else. There was someone standing outside the van on the passenger side, just standing there in the shadows, barely visible. I squinted, trying to see better. The person standing outside was wearing all dark clothing. Dark pants, dark hoodie, hands in their pockets. They were facing the drive-through line, facing my direction, just standing there. Not moving, not looking at their phone, just standing and staring. A weird feeling crept over me. The kind of feeling you get when you realize someone's watching you. I looked away and tried to focus on my phone again, but I couldn't shake it. I glanced back at the van. The person was still standing there, still staring in this direction. The car in front of me pulled forward to the window, and I moved up to the speaker to order. I ordered my usual, spicy chicken sandwich, waffle fries, and a lemonade. The employee told me my total and asked me to pull forward. As I was pulling up to the window, I looked at the van again. The person who had been standing outside was gone. I scanned the parking lot but couldn't see them anywhere. The van's interior light was still on, and the driver was still sitting there. I reached the window, and the employee, a young guy probably in his late teens, opened it and greeted me with the usual Chick-fil-A cheerfulness. I handed him my card, and while he was processing it, I asked him if he'd noticed the white van in the corner of the lot. He leaned out the window a bit and looked in that direction. He said, "Yeah, that van had been there for like an hour." I asked if that was normal, and he kind of shrugged and said sometimes people park there to eat or wait for someone. But then he said something that made my stomach drop. He said one of his co-workers had gone out earlier to take the trash to the dumpster, and the person in the van had called out to her, asked her to come over to the van for a second. She'd ignored them and come back inside, and then told the manager about it. The manager had gone out to check, but by the time he got out there, the van had moved to a different spot in the lot. The employee handed me back my card and said they'd been keeping an eye on it ever since. He told me to be careful and handed me my food. I thanked him and pulled forward, my heart beating a little faster now. I should have just left, driven straight home. But curiosity and concern got the better of me. I pulled into a parking spot near the front of the building, under one of the bright lights, and put my car in park. I sat there for a minute, trying to decide what to do. I looked at the van again. The driver was still sitting there, still looking down at something, and then I saw the person in dark clothing again. They were walking along the edge of the parking lot, staying in the shadows, moving slowly. They walked past a few parked cars and then stopped. Just stopped and stood there, facing the drive-thru again. I pulled out my phone and called my roommate Jessica. She answered after a few rings, and I explained where I was and what I was seeing. Jessica has always been more paranoid than me, so I figured she'd have some advice. She immediately told me to leave. Just drive away and don't look back. But I told her I was worried about the other people in the drive-thru line. What if this person was targeting someone? Jessica said I should call the police then, not sit there and watch. She had a point. I told her I'd call her back and hung up. I dialed 911 and explained the situation to the dispatcher, told them about the van, about the person in dark clothing acting suspicious, about what the Chick-fil-A employee had said. The dispatcher said they'd send an officer to check it out and asked me to stay on the line. While I was on the phone with the dispatcher, another car pulled into the drive-thru line. It was a small sedan, looked like a woman driving alone. She pulled up to the speaker to order. That's when the person in dark clothing started moving again. They walked out of the shadows, heading directly toward the drive-thru line, directly toward that car. My heart was pounding now. I told the dispatcher what was happening. They told me not to approach the situation, that officers were on their way. But I watched as the person in dark clothing got closer and closer to that car. They walked right up to the passenger side and just stood there. The woman in the car clearly noticed them because I saw her head turn sharply in their direction. Then the person in dark clothing did something that made my blood run cold. They reached up and knocked on the passenger window. 3 slow knocks. The woman in the car didn't roll down the window. Smart. But the person didn't leave. They just stood there, knocking again. Harder this time. I couldn't just sit there anymore. I honked my horn. Long and loud. The person in dark clothing turned and looked at me. Even from this distance, even in the darkness, I could feel their eyes on me. They stood there for a moment, and then slowly backed away from the car. The woman in the sedan immediately pulled out of the drive-thru line and sped out of the parking lot. The person in dark clothing started walking. Not running, just walking. Toward my car. I locked my doors and told the dispatcher someone was approaching me. They told me to drive away if I felt unsafe. The person kept walking, getting closer. I could see them more clearly now under the parking lot lights, average height, thin build, face obscured by the hood. They stopped about 20 feet from my car and just stood there. We stared at each other for what felt like forever, but was probably only 10 or 15 seconds. Then they turned and walked back toward the van. They got in on the passenger side and immediately the van's engine started. The interior light went off. The van pulled out of the parking spot and drove toward the exit, passing right by my car. I tried to see the license plate, but it was covered in mud or dirt, completely unreadable. I described the van to the dispatcher as it left the parking lot. White cargo van, older model, no windows in the back, license plate obscured. They said officers were pulling into the area now and would try to locate it. 2 police cars pulled into the Chick-fil-A parking lot about 30 seconds after the van left. I hung up with the dispatcher and got out of my car to talk to the officers. I explained everything that had happened. They went inside and talked to the employees who confirmed the story about the person calling out to the employee earlier. The officers said they'd patrol the area and look for the van, but without a license plate number it would be difficult. They took my statement and contact information and said they'd be in touch if they had any updates. One of the officers told me something that made the whole situation even more disturbing. He said there had been 2 other reports in the past month of a white cargo van matching that description being seen in different fast food parking lots around Charlotte. In both cases, a person in dark clothing had approached cars with women driving alone. In one case, they'd tried to open the car door. Fortunately, it had been locked. The officer said they believed it might be the same person or people, but without better descriptions or a license plate, they hadn't been able to identify any suspects. He told me I did the right thing by calling and by honking my horn. He said the woman in the sedan probably avoided a dangerous situation because of that. After the officers left, I sat in my car for a few more minutes, trying to calm down. My food was cold by now, but I didn't care. I wasn't hungry anymore anyway. I drove home, constantly checking my rearview mirror the entire way, paranoid that the van might be following me. It wasn't, but the fear was still there. When I got home, Jessica was waiting up for me. I told her everything, and she was furious that I'd stayed instead of leaving immediately. But she was also glad I'd potentially helped that other woman. We stayed up talking about it for another hour, both of us too wired to sleep. The next day, I called the police department to see if there were any updates. They said they'd spotted a van matching the description in a different part of town, but by the time they'd approached it, the occupants had fled. They found the van abandoned in a parking garage. It had been reported stolen 3 days earlier. No fingerprints, no evidence left behind. Whoever was using it knew what they were doing. I still go to that Chick-fil-A, but never at night anymore. Only during the day when it's busy and there are lots of people around, and I'm constantly scanning parking lots now, looking for white vans or people lurking in shadows. Jessica thinks I'm being paranoid, but I don't think so. I think I'm being careful. There's a difference. The thing that bothers me most is thinking about that woman in the sedan. I wonder if she knows how close she came to something terrible. I wonder if she even reported it or if she just drove away and tried to forget about it. And I think about all the other parking lots in Charlotte, all the other late-night drive-thrus, all the other women driving alone just trying to grab some food after work. How many times has this happened before? How many times did someone not honk their horn? How many people didn't call the police because they thought they were overreacting? And what exactly were these people planning to do? The officer said one of them had tried to open a car door. What happens if the door is unlocked? What happens if someone rolls down their window? I don't have answers to these questions, and that's what keeps me up at night. All I know is that something very wrong was happening in that parking lot. And I'm grateful that I trusted my instincts, that I paid attention to what felt off, that I made that phone call. If you're someone who goes through drive-thrus late at night, please be aware of your surroundings. Keep your doors locked. Keep your windows up. And if something feels wrong, trust that feeling. Don't talk yourself out of it. Don't worry about seeming paranoid or overreacting. Just trust your gut and get yourself to safety. That Chick-fil-A employee who refused to go near the van, she trusted her instincts. The woman in the sedan who didn't roll down her window, she trusted her instincts. And because of that, they're okay. We're all okay. But I can't stop thinking about the people who might not have been as lucky. The people who didn't notice the van in the corner. The people who thought they were being silly for feeling scared. Stay alert out there, especially in parking lots at night, especially when you're alone. Because there are people out there who count on you not paying attention, who count on you being polite and rolling down your window when they knock, who count on you assuming the best in people. I learned that lesson in a Chick-fil-A parking lot on a Tuesday night in August, and I'll never forget it. This happened last month, and it's completely changed how I think about running errands after dark. My name is Jordan, and I'm a 24-year-old graphic designer living in Atlanta. I'm the kind of person who's always busy, always working on a project, always forgetting to do basic things like grocery shopping or picking up prescriptions until the last possible minute. That's what led to me being at a Chick-fil-A parking lot at 10 o'clock on a Thursday night. I'd been working from home all day, cranking out designs for a client deadline. I'd been so focused that I completely forgot to eat lunch. By the time I finished around 9:30, I was starving. I checked my fridge and it was basically empty except for some questionable leftovers and a half-empty bottle of ketchup, so I decided to make a quick run to get food. The closest fast food place to my apartment was a Chick-fil-A about 5 minutes away. I knew they closed at 10, but I figured if I hurried, I could make it before they shut down the drive-thru. I threw on a hoodie, grabbed my keys, and headed out. I made it to the parking lot at 9:58. The drive-thru was still open, and there was only one car ahead of me. Perfect timing. I pulled into line and waited. The car in front of me was taking forever to order, and I found myself getting impatient. I just wanted my food so I could go home, eat, and maybe watch something on Netflix before passing out. While I was waiting, I noticed there were only 2 other cars in the parking lot besides mine and the one in front of me. One was parked near the building, probably an employee's car. The other was parked in the back corner of the lot near the dumpster area. It was a dark-colored SUV with tinted windows. The engine was running. I could see the exhaust coming from the tailpipe. At the time, I didn't think anything of it. Maybe they were waiting for someone. Maybe they were finishing a phone call before going inside. People do that all the time. The car in front of me finally finished ordering and pulled forward. I pulled up to the speaker and placed my order. Spicy deluxe sandwich, large fries, and a cookies and cream milkshake. The employee told me my total and asked me to pull forward to the first window. As I was pulling forward, I glanced at the SUV again. It was still there, still running, but now I noticed something odd. The driver's side door was open, not wide open, just cracked, like someone had opened it but not gotten out yet. I could see the interior light was on, casting a faint glow. I reached the first window and paid for my food. The employee, a teenage girl, handed me my receipt and told me to pull forward to the next window. As I was pulling away, she leaned out and said something I didn't quite catch. I stopped and asked her to repeat it. She said, in a much quieter voice, "Be careful out there tonight. Someone's been acting weird in the parking lot." I asked her what she meant, and she glanced back into the restaurant, like she was checking if anyone was listening. Then she said that about an hour ago, someone had come through the drive-thru and ordered food. Normal enough. But then they'd parked in the back of the lot and had been sitting there ever since. She said one of the managers had gone out to check on them, to make sure they were okay, and the person had just waved him away. Said they were fine, but here's the thing that creeped her out. After the manager came back inside, she'd been watching the SUV through the window, and she saw someone get out of the passenger side. Someone who hadn't been visible before, like they'd been lying down in the seat or something. That person had walked around the parking lot for a bit, then gotten back in the SUV. She said it just felt wrong. The whole situation felt wrong. I thanked her for the heads up and pulled forward to the second window. My mind was racing now. The SUV with the running engine, the open door, Someone lying down in the passenger seat. What kind of situation was that? I collected my food from the second window, and the employee there, a young guy, told me to have a good night and drive safe. Something in his tone made it sound like more than just the standard farewell. I pulled out of the drive-through line and should have turned right toward the exit. That's what any normal person would have done, but instead, I found myself pulling into a parking spot near the front of the building, right under a bright light. I put my car in park and sat there, trying to decide what to do. I looked at the SUV. From this angle, I could see it more clearly. The driver's side door was definitely open, and I could see someone sitting in the driver's seat. But the passenger seat looked empty. Where was the person who had gotten back in? I pulled out my phone and texted my best friend Marcus. Told him where I was and that something felt off. He responded immediately, asking if I was okay. I said I was fine, just concerned about a weird situation. He told me to leave, just drive home and don't worry about it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. I decided to call the non-emergency police line. I explained the situation to the operator, told them about the SUV, about what the Chick-fil-A employees had told me, about the person lying down in the passenger seat. The operator said they'd send an officer to check it out. They asked me to stay on the line. While I was on the phone, I kept watching the SUV. The interior light was still on, and I could see the driver's silhouette. They weren't moving, just sitting there, waiting for something, or someone. Then I saw movement in my peripheral vision. I turned my head and felt my heart jump into my throat. There was someone standing next to my car. On the passenger side, I hadn't seen them approach. They were just suddenly there, standing at my window, looking in at me. I screamed. I actually screamed. The person stepped back, and I could see them more clearly now. It was a man, probably in his 30s, wearing jeans and a zip-up jacket. He raised his hands in a calming gesture and said something I couldn't hear through the closed window. The operator on the phone was asking me what was wrong, and I told them someone had just approached my car. The man knocked on my window. I shook my head no and pointed at my phone, indicating I was on a call. He knocked again, more insistently. Then he tried the door handle. My doors were locked, thank God, but the sound of him trying to open it made my whole body go cold. The operator told me to drive away immediately. I put my phone on speaker and set it in the cup holder. I started my car and put it in reverse, but the man moved behind my car, blocking me in. I could see him in my backup camera. He was just standing there, hands at his sides, staring at my car. I laid on my horn, long and loud. The man didn't move. I honked again, and finally he stepped aside, but he didn't leave. He walked around to my driver's side and started knocking on that window, pounding on it. I could see his face clearly now under the parking lot lights, and what scared me most was how calm he looked. No anger, no emotion, just calm determination. The front doors of the Chick-fil-A burst open, and 2 employees ran out, the manager and another guy. They started yelling at the man to back away from my car. The man turned to look at them, and in that moment I floored it in reverse. I backed up about 15 feet, then threw my car into drive and peeled out toward the exit. As I was driving away, I looked in my rearview mirror. The man was walking back toward the SUV, not running, just walking, like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just tried to get into my car. The employees were standing there watching him, and I could see one of them on their phone, probably calling the police. I drove straight home, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. The operator stayed on the line with me until I was inside my apartment with the door locked. She said officers were at the Chick-fil-A now and would be in touch. I thanked her and hung up. Marcus called me about 30 seconds later. I'd forgotten I'd texted him. I explained everything, and he immediately said he was coming over. I told him he didn't need to, but he insisted. He showed up 20 minutes later with his girlfriend Tasha, and the three of us stayed up talking about what had happened. The police called me around midnight. They said when they'd arrived at the Chick-fil-A, both the man and the SUV were gone. The employees gave descriptions and said they'd check security footage. One officer came to my apartment to take my full statement. He asked if I'd gotten the license plate number of the SUV. I hadn't. I'd been too focused on getting away. The officer told me something that made the whole thing even more disturbing. He said there had been several reports over the past 2 months of similar incidents at various fast food restaurants around Atlanta. Someone in an SUV, sometimes with a partner, targeting people in parking lots. Mostly women, mostly people alone. In some cases, they'd tried to get victims to roll down their windows by claiming they needed help or directions. In other cases, they'd tried to open car doors directly. He said I'd done everything right. Kept my doors locked, didn't roll down my window, called for help, and got away. He said not everyone had been as cautious, and some situations had escalated. He didn't elaborate on what that meant, but I could imagine. After the officer left, Marcus and Tasha insisted on staying the night. Tasha slept in my bed with me, and Marcus slept on the couch. I barely slept at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that man's face at my window, that calm, emotionless expression. The next day, the police called again. They'd reviewed the Chick-fil-A security footage and gotten a partial plate number on the SUV. They were working on tracking it down. They also confirmed that the man's behavior matched the pattern from other incidents. They believed I'd been targeted. A week later, they called with an update. They'd located the SUV. It had been abandoned in a grocery store parking lot across town. It had been reported stolen 5 days before my incident. No fingerprints. Nothing to identify who'd been using it. The investigation was ongoing, but without more evidence, there wasn't much they could do. I think about that night constantly. I think about what would have happened if I hadn't locked my doors. If I hadn't kept my window up. If those employees hadn't come outside. I think about the person in the passenger seat of the SUV, the one who'd been lying down. Where were they when that man approached my car? Were they supposed to do something? Were they waiting for him to get my door open? I also think about all the times I've been careless. All the times I've sat in parking lots scrolling through my phone, doors unlocked, not paying attention to my surroundings. All the times I've rolled down my window when someone approached asking for directions or help. I got lucky. I got so incredibly lucky that this happened at a time and place where I was alert enough to respond correctly. Marcus says I should stop dwelling on it, that I'm safe, and that's what matters. But I can't stop thinking about the other people this has happened to. The ones who maybe weren't as lucky. The ones who rolled down their window or didn't lock their doors. What happened to them? If you're reading this, please learn from my experience. When you're in a parking lot, especially at night, especially alone, be aware. Lock your doors before you even start your car. Don't sit there scrolling through your phone with your windows down and your doors unlocked. And if someone approaches your car and something feels off, trust that feeling. Don't roll down your window to be polite. Don't open your door to help someone. Just call for help and get yourself to safety. I used to think I was being paranoid when I'd lock my doors immediately or avoid certain parking lots at night. Now, I know I wasn't being paranoid, I was being smart. And that awareness, that vigilance, that's what saved me in that Chick-fil-A parking lot on a Thursday night in September. Stay safe. Stay alert. and trust your instincts. They exist for a reason.